Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of A Mic on the Podium with me, Michael Seal. Before we start, I want to thank my latest Patreon subscriber, Bedwin, for his support and all my other Patreon subscribers for their continued support. This podcast would struggle to continue without them, and my Patreon page has become a great place to learn about and to chat about all aspects of conducting. There'll be more about my Patreon page later on in this episode. Today, I conduct a conversation with a Dutch conductor who went through the famous German Kapellmeister system, working at 3 different opera houses, including 10 years as General Music Director in Koblenz. Since 2018, he has been the principal guest conductor of the WDR Funkhaus Orchestra in Cologne. It's a great pleasure to welcome Enrico Delamboye. Enrico, wonderful to see you again and to chat with you again. How are you?
Good afternoon. Hi, I'm fine. Thank you, Michael.
Good. I say again because we worked together on some music for the WDR Funkhaus Orchestra. You were doing some pre-rehearsals for me, and we had a good chat over Zoom very late one night when my plane had taken ages to get into Dusseldorf. But it's very nice to see you again, and thank you for that work.
Oh, you're very welcome. Great to see you again.
Regular listeners will know I go right back to the beginning, and I read that you were born in Germany, but you're actually Dutch.
Right.
And
yeah.
I also believe that your father was musical and was a tenor. So how did music first enter your life, other than hearing your father sing? And what was your first instrument?
It was all around in my life. It was just normal that we would have daddy singing at home or having some old disc running in the background of the roads he was studying at that time.
Yeah.
And actually, I cannot exactly remember, but I know that at an early age, I started going to the piano lessons because I liked to play the piano. And then they said, well, would you like to play a little bit more and find a little bit more out of this instrument? And I said yes. But to be honest, I couldn't read notes at that time. And I was not able to read notes for quite a long time because I was used to playing on the ears. So I would ask my teacher to play it twice for me. And then my dad would play it a little bit for me. And then I would know what to do. And I was ready for the next lesson. And that was quite a few years that it went like that. And then they found out he is very bad at reading notes. And then I had to improve my skills on that as well. And then, and then things got more easier, but it took me a long time to realize that.
There comes a point, doesn't there, when, I mean, in the UK, the system is that we take graded exams. There are 8 grades. And between grade 5 and grade 6, you have to take a theory exam. You cannot do grade 6 until you've done your grade 5 theory. And there comes a point when you have to sit down with somebody and talk about key signatures and rhythms and and figured bass and all that sort of stuff. And it's necessary.
It's fantastic. Once you get this alphabet, it's kind of a new alphabet, I would say. You're able to speak a lot of new languages. But at the age of 8 or 9, you think, well, I don't need that because music goes all via the ears.
Yes.
That's which is true, of course, for a lot of listeners. But if you want to do this profession, you need to learn this language. And that's what I realized at that point, and was very happy to accept that and learn it. And by the age of 8, I said I want to become a conductor. So yeah.
Oh, wow. That soon.
Yeah, that's very early because it was everything around in my life. And my dad was singing at the Staatstheater in Wiesbaden, which is in the middle of Germany. And he was singing the role of Mime, which is one of the little Nibelungen in this tetralogy of Wagner. And I was so fascinated, actually being a figurant, how do you call it, an extra on stage in this third theme. But I was more fascinated by this guy in the pit who was waving his arms and dividing air and guiding these 100 people through this complex work. And there was a point when I said, well, that's awesome, Daddy. I want to do that.
Yeah. And what was his response? As a singer or as a musician?
Well, he responded as a musician and a father in a great manner. He said, if you like that, then I will not forbid you to do that, but I will help you where I can. But you realize that you have to do a lot on your own. That's what he said. And be aware of that. He said this to me as an 8-year-old. Well, the business is not always like this. I mean, you're mainly surrounded by idiots, but you have a few nice people around you as well. And always remember that, my son. Now, when I'm sometimes in very problematic productions, I remember his words. I get a smile and kind of try to solve the problems which I'm dealing with at that time.
Oh,
So
that's a wonderful attitude, and to have it told to you so early is wonderful, isn't it? I mean, there's
yeah,
we've got a few family mottos here that are very unrepeatable on the podcast, with explicit words in. But yeah, to learn that so early on and to realize that it's hard work.
yeah.
B, you're going to be alone a lot, and it's a lonely profession. But C, it won't always go as you think it is, and there are a lot of idiots and people around who are there to scupper your life.
You have to deal with that. But if you believe in this profession, and if you believe in making music and giving your best at that, with the best preparation you could do, the best energy you can give at that time when you're there, well, then it can be a great profession, and you don't want to do anything else.
No, I agree. Well, my journey's slightly different, but you go to the Conservatory of Maastricht, and I read that you did piano and conducting. Were they running side by side?
Well, it was just because I was still very, very usable at the piano, so to say. I was accompanying a lot of male and mixed choirs here. I was playing the mess in the church and stuff like that. So I didn't want to give up all this income already that I had when I was 16, 17, 18. So after middle school, it was for me kind of logical to go to the next conservatory, the next stop next by, and it was just around the corner, so to say. But I was lucky that I had a very good teacher there for piano and for conducting, which I realize now. But at that time, it was just a choice. Okay, let's pick the next school next door. Yeah. And I went there because I was already at that time in a relationship with my today's wife, so to say. So it was all logical for me to stay where I was and just learn this profession. And from there on, I know, okay, I would have to leave the Netherlands because there is not that much possibility here for young conductors to start and to develop. But to be honest, afterwards, regarded from now, I was very lucky to have made that choice and to have met those people that taught me there.
I was going to move on, but you've reminded me of at least two Dutch conductors, Jack van Steen and Anthony Hermers, who said pretty much the same thing as you just said. Which is, there aren't many opportunities for young Dutch conductors in the Netherlands. Whereas you could argue that there is a great school for conducting, Jack's school with Ed Spanjaard and The Hague is a wonderful school, and many great conductors have come from it. But I wonder why you feel that as a native, as a local, that that it's difficult for you to succeed, and you need to go and
abroad.
Abroad.
Yeah, because that's the Netherlands. The Netherlands are a small country, so to say. And it's a little bit the attitude here. Okay, we might have good people from here, but if they really survived in this business for 20 years abroad, then we might give them a chance in our own country. So that's how it works. And let's be honest, I mean, we don't have the system like in Germany where you can really start as a, if you compare it to a kitchen where you can start as a salad help and don't have to start at the level of chef de cuisine. And that's something in the Netherlands. There is actually, you're at an amateur ensemble where you're preparing an operetta for 1 year, and then you have these 3 performances in the local town hall. Or it's really the professional level in, for example, the International Opera in Amsterdam, which is, I mean, it's not typical Dutch because it's international. Then you have the Reisopera in Enschede, still connected to the professional segment, and Opera Zuid here in Maastricht situated. So if you're not lucky to have a chance at one of those 3, and of course the one in Amsterdam will invite you at last because they're more international and they cannot take too much risks of inviting young talent to lead a whole production. I mean, with international cast and a lot of money. So then your way goes to either Opera Zuid or the Nationale Reisopera, the national travel company. And of course, they're always looking for young talent. But if you come from conservatory, a lot which you shouldn't do, and a few things you might do, and then you really have to start making these miles, these kilometers in the pit, and making the faults and making the good experiences. And that's something which can be offered more in the German system, because I was lucky as well to be a pianist. So I could start as a Kapellmeister and repetitor at the same time. And that's how I got into the business and could make my flight hours, as I always say.
Yeah, your flying hours indeed.
Yeah.
We're going to come to the much talked about Kapellmeister system in a little while. I want to ask you, whenever I discover a teacher's name that I don't know, I always try and find out what sort of teacher they were. Jan Stuhlen is the name of the guy who taught you
Yeah.
in Maastricht. What was his style, his approach? I mean, everybody knows now, especially if they listen to this podcast, how Musin taught and how Paneler teaches and how Hans Swarovski taught at the Vienna Hochschule. What was Jan Stuhlen's style? Was he a score study guy with a little technique, or lots of technique and less on score study, or an overall 50-50?
He was a unique combination of great baton skills, very clear, clean technique style, a lot of wisdom on instrumentation, on composers. He was like a lexicon, like a book you could open and you could ask something to him, and he would always have an answer or a reference to kind of a source. He would know which editions there were. He was loved by orchestras because he was a conductor that was always clear in his announcements of how he wanted something to be played. But he was a conductor as well. If there was just one rehearsal for a repertoire that took more than 3 hours, he would always be able to get it done in time. So if you would call him, you would know, okay, this guy will do the job, and in the end, we'll have a concert with an quality at least of that level, or maybe higher if there's more time or more preparation time for the musicians or whatever. So he was very reliable, he was very skilled, he was very informed, but he was not a big showman, so to say, and he was not a guy that would sell himself everywhere regardless what his quality was the last day. So he was very honest, which brought him a lot of credit, and at a certain point it got him a lot of problems as well.
Yeah.
And that's something which I absolutely appreciated. It was, he as a teacher was, what you see is what you get. He was not a teacher that would say you have to do this, but you kind of came into the conservatory and he said, well, you paid money to receive lessons, you're kind of like a customer, I can teach you as much as I know, I like to transfer everything, but you are the one who has to work, you are the one who has to be impatient to learn this, you're the one who has to work on his skills, and we offer you everything here except maybe for a regular weekly contact with the orchestra, but the rest is all there. We had 2 fine pianists, we had a great class. He was a very skilled guy who had a great mixture of still being in the profession and being asked regularly by several orchestras abroad and in the Netherlands as well. And when he was there, he was teaching at a full 100% and would try to get the best out of every student on his level. So yeah, always busy and always for the music. And besides that, he was a very nice guy to be with. And we had a lot of laughs together. And in the end, we had always very famous end of the season parties together. So the last lesson was always 3 hours of lesson for everybody, and then we would somewhere disappear near Maastricht with a lot of wine and beautiful food and colleagues and friends. And yeah, so there was the whole aspect of being very busy with the business and with your profession, but don't forget to live as well. That was something that he taught us. And I can just speak very positive about Jan, because he was an inspiration to all of us.
He sounds like the sort of person I would get on with, because some of the things you just said ring true with my ideas about what I think a conductor should be. Having spent 22 years sitting in the City of Birmingham Symphony Orchestra playing in the second violin section, I saw every type of conductor. And and what you've just said is very true in the fact that if you're just open and honest, and sometimes you'll happily say to an orchestra, "Hey, I screwed up there," or "Let me do that again for me, not for you, because I need to do it again."
Yeah.
Most orchestras appreciate that, but sometimes there are orchestras that don't. They look at you and go, "Well, you should know that. Why am I doing it again for you?" And they get very stuffy about it, and they want that old school maestro with this cloak of invincibility around them.
And if they want that, they won't hire me again, because
exactly, yeah.
But that's their choice, and I'm fine with that, because now being in the profession for almost 25 years, I know what I can, I know what I cannot do, and I know that some things I do is being liked very much in one orchestra in one city, and you go to the next city with almost the same skills, the same repertoire, and they just don't like it. And then I still try to have a nice week as much as possible, and I already know before the first concert, we won't come back here and they won't see me again, and which is fine. But that needs a kind of, it needs a few years to come to that point and to find this rest in yourself. But those are all very important experiences that every conductor has to make, I think.
Yeah, absolutely true. I mean, I keep a spreadsheet of every concert I've ever conducted with every orchestra I've ever conducted, and it's now 833 concerts with 51 orchestras or something, even to the point where I know that I've been re-invited by 80% of those orchestras. Now, that's a high number.
That's fantastic. I always say if 50% doesn't dislike you, you're a fantastic conductor.
But the point is not to focus on the 20 or whatever the percentages of people who don't like you. It's to focus on the 80 or whatever the number is that do like you. Yeah, and to accept that, when you go and make a debut, I've got 2 debuts coming up after Christmas that with orchestras I've never conducted before. There's a possibility that they won't like you, and frankly, you won't like them. But there's no point in trying to avoid that by being anything other than yourself. You've just got to be you,
Michael. Yeah, indeed. Authenticity, and be yourself, and see what happens.
Now, I mentioned it earlier on. Was it straight out of Conservatoire of Maastricht that you went and started in the much fabled German Kapellmeister system?
To be honest, I had to end my studies a little bit earlier to be able to come into this profession, because I was lucky to be able to conduct a concert in the Concertgebouw of the International Opera Studio in the Netherlands at that time, when I was still studying in Maastricht. And the former director of that studio said, well, I will have Bernard Haitink or Ede Duarte to conduct this concert because I need a Dutchman. And if they don't have time or don't want to do it, I'll try to find some guy or girl here in the Netherlands who is leading this concert as a conductor, because it's the Nederlandse Opera Studio, it's the Dutch Opera Studio. And let's try to help our talents or our skilled people that have made a lot of career and name in the world. And I was lucky that Bernard Haitink and Ede Duarte were not able to conduct that concert. So he was looking around all the conservatories in the country, and somehow it was opera connected as well. And he somehow found out there is this guy in Maastricht, this young guy. He is somehow fond of opera, and he has done a few productions on the conservatory. And he is they don't complain about him, and they think this kind of works. So then he came to see one of the performances which I was conducting in the conservatory, a small opera production. And he said, well, we're going to do this. I believe in you. So that's why I was lucky to conduct the concert in the Concertgebouw. And at that time, there were like 150 Intendanten in the hall, which I didn't know. I was just doing my music and working with the people that I was rehearsing that day. And then after the concert, one of the Intendanten came to me and he said, young man, we have a position for Zweite Kapellmeister, so to say the third conductor in the system of that house, and I think you should apply. That's what he said to me. I said, oh, well, thank you, great. So, yeah, let's exchange some. That was at that time it was still phone numbers, not mails. Yeah. And a few days later I got a phone call, and then we organized the rest, and I just went there. It was my application for Zweite Kapellmeister at the Staatstheater Wiesbaden, which is a huge opera house, which still had a lot of repertoire at that time. And I just thought, well, this is what I want to do. I want to conduct opera. I want to conduct a lot of symphonic repertoire, and I might get a chance there. And I just went there, and there were 6 other guys as well in this whole ceremony, so to say. And in the end, the other 6 didn't have to move to Wiesbaden, and I had to move there. And that it all went very quick. And there was a first round with only rehearsal. Then there was a round with a performance of Lord Sings Wildschütz, seldom played piece nowadays.
Yeah.
And somehow they thought I was the less worst, so to say, of the ones competing there. Yeah, and so I went back to Jan. I said, Jan, I have a problem. They want me to start after some. We don't have a problem, he said. You're just going to finish your studies early. I'm very happy for you. That's the aim why I was training you for.
Absolutely, yeah.
So we'll organize this. And I did. And then I did my exam of the Maastricht Conservatory with a self-organized orchestra in a manege in the middle of the Netherlands with Rossini's La Gazzetta, which is a very unknown opera by Rossini, and an exam commission came there, and I graduated with a very high point, and everybody was happy. And a few days later, I had to start in Wiesbaden, and it was directly diving into repertoire. I had a rerun of Romeo and Julia, the Prokofiev ballet. I had to do the rerun of Fledermaus. I had to do the production of Hansel and Gretel, which was already on the season's list. There was one new production I was able to really start rehearsing from the beginning. That was Mozart's Don Giovanni, because our chief conductor at that time didn't like to do that. Or he didn't have time, I don't know. So I was having 10 premieres of great operatic or ballet works in that time, which was a great school for me. I just was conducting and studying and sleeping and playing the piano wherever possible to study the new roles with the singers for Giovanni and for the other reruns, because it was an ensemble theater. So the one that was singing Gretel was your Zelina as well, and was your Adele in the Fledermaus and stuff like that. So it was kind of, I came into a big family from one day to another, and it was just like a speed train, not stopping, and carrying on for.
Well, the first person I interviewed who'd been in the Kapellmeister system, and dear listeners, I will quote Kevin John Edisay again, who said that he thought the system was brutal. The amount of time that you spend playing the piano, conducting, learning, studying scores. And I've said that to every Kapellmeister system person since, and they've all either nodded or said, yeah, brutal's a good word.
Brutal is a fantastic word, Michael, but this job sometimes can be brutal as well, and you have to invest hours, and that's what they call in Germany von der Pike auf, which says from the bottom of the tree.
Yeah.
You have to start, and then it starts developing and growing. And of course, in the beginning, it doesn't look like a tree, but in the end, everybody says, "Oh, what a beautiful tree!"
Yes,
So it needs this time of growth. It needs this time of development. And of course, maybe in the symphonic world, there are shortcuts possible. But I think for a conductor of mainly operatic repertoire, this is a good school of being humble, staying humble to the profession, staying humble to the singers, because what they have to deliver is amazing. Staying humble to orchestras that have to play repertoire, sometimes with not enough rehearsals, and still giving their best. And I really believe in this, that 90% of the orchestra really is every night giving their best. And sometimes things just turn out better than the other day. And moving on and learning from your mistakes. I think that's the most important thing that everybody should do. And of course, there were nights that I said, well, I'm going to stop this profession, get my own bakery or a supermarket or whatever. But 2 days later, you would just come out almost crying of the beauty that just had been presented to you. So it's, you have a lot of amplitude in the emotions that you experience in this Kapellmeister system. But to be honest, I have had Stagione productions in which the fifth performance was actually on a level that I thought, well, we can hardly ask money for this because we have done much better, So no solution is the best, but I think it's good to have made this experience and to put everything into a relationship or in a relation of what what people are able to do and for myself, it was a very interesting experience.
Well, I mean, there are two. One thing I'd like to add to what you just said was that, whilst it may well be considered brutal or any other synonym or a similar word, the point is you're at an age of your life where you've got the energy to take on all of that. And you are a sponge. You want to absorb all of the information from the singers, from the orchestra, from from directors, from intendants. The other thing I wanted to add, and I also said this to Kevin, was more often than not, when a name like Kevin's appears, when I got to hear about yourself and all of the other people I've interviewed on this podcast who went through the system, I've then looked them up on YouTube, and every single one of you is a really technically sorted conductor because of how much you've had to be clear because of the opera, and and I said,
rehearsals at all, indeed, sometimes
indeed
for a piece,
and I said to Kevin, I said, what's funny is you see these names appear all of a sudden in the UK doing symphonic works. They're in their, I don't know, 30s, mid-30s or whatever, and you think, where's he been? And then you look up and go, Kapellmeister. Then you look at them up on YouTube and go, oh yeah, he's really good, or she's really good, I think, if you have piano skills, which, I don't, but for any young conductor, if you have piano skills to get into that system, so many really sorted conductors come out of it.
It's a rough
Really,
system.
yeah.
But if you survive, then you may do this until the coffin or until you want to retire. I don't know.
Yeah. Obviously, being a Kapellmeister system conductor, you've spent a lot of time in opera theatres. You've been at Wuppertal, Oper Köln. You were GMD, or General Music Director, at the Theater Koblenz for 9-10 years, something like
10
that.
years in total, yeah.
Which, that takes an awful lot of time and energy of your life. Being a GMD, I would assume.
The official title was Musikdirektor des Theaters, which is I was responsible for the theater there.
Yeah.
And we still had a colleague who was mainly responsible for the symphonic part, but still he was doing some opera in the theater, and I was doing quite a few symphonic concerts as a guest conductor with the own orchestra that I was conducting in the theater, which is funny. That's how the situation is there. Yeah, it takes a lot of time, Michael, of course. But sorry, you wanted to ask me something more.
Well, no, it was basically going along the lines of, when you're embroiled in, running theatres and things like that, you spend a lot of time in a city organizing, productions, speaking to directors, singers, whatever else. It's then how do you start picking up symphonic work outside, which is where, I'm going to come along to the WDR Funkhaus, which is where we both have a connection, or where we met very soon. But how do you I'm sure your agent is doing that for you. It's finding times to make debuts, away from Koblenz and away from wherever you're working.
Yeah, that was in the time. I mean, I was lucky to be already in this period when I was Zweite Kapellmeister in Wiesbaden, way before I was chief conductor at this theater in Koblenz. That within the first year of Zweite Kapellmeister, I was being offered a salary by the intendant. And when we were having this discussion, I was saying, oh, well, that's not bad for netto. And then there was a little silence on the side. And I said, no, my dear, this is brutal. And then I said, well, thank you for the offer, but I have to reflect on this. And then he called me 3 days later and I said, okay, I know that you probably cannot give me the money because your budget is limited, but I need somehow the possibility to be able to conduct outside the theater and to make my guest debuts at other orchestras. And so he quasi guaranteed to me that I would have some guaranteed Gastierurlaub, which means guaranteed holidays for guesting, so to say. And this made it possible that I was already that it was possible for me as a Zweite Kapellmeister to go guesting at other German orchestras, at other Dutch orchestras sometimes, or Swiss orchestras abroad, which brought me this connection that I already could establish my symphonic or whatever other repertoire at other opera houses or orchestras. And of course, this was always attracted by the agency that I was working with, or sometimes it was just mouth-to-mouth commercial from, hey, this guy he's quite okay, so we can have him for a next production. And of course, orchestra members get around a lot as well, especially in the Rhein-Main-Gebiet there. You see people from Frankfurt, from Mainz, from other operas. If the piece you're playing is only played at 3 opera houses and it's kind of a rare piece, and so they say, okay, well, we've worked with this guy, or let's try him at another orchestra. So that's how it went in that time. So I was lucky to start this guesting quite at an early stage as well, and finding time to prepare that. Well, in that time, it was, to be honest, it was in the night or in the nights.
Yeah.
And I was lucky if I was able to sleep for 6 hours. But I mean, then you're in your mid-20s, and somehow the mind and the body, it goes along with that, and it supports it. And there's always this thrill of being able to do that. And of course, you don't want to start there unprepared. So there is this drive and this necessity to be prepared at that point. So somehow the system works it out that you are prepared for the first rehearsal, and all works out.
Well, one of those orchestras you would have guested with, I'm sure, I'm going to go on to WDR now, or WDR, is the WDR Funkhaus Orchestra, where you've been principal guest conductor since 2018. and so the listener understands that orchestra and how far removed it is from, let's say, some of the opera work that you've done and probably the symphonic work that you've done. Their basic remit is to play any music that the Verdi Air Symphony Orchestra does not play.
That's exactly the description.
Yeah, it's literally anything and everything. And our discussion over Zoom was because I was about to go and conduct a concert of German hip hop and rap music with the German hip hop and rap artist, and you were going to run through the arrangements for me and for the orchestra, which sort of highlights the sort of music you end up conducting there. I've done video game music there. I'm going there soon to do a crossover with a trumpet soloist, with recordings, and literally anything can come up in your way. The first time I worked there, we recorded "Let It Go" from Frozen, and then the Nino Rota harp concerto. Literally crazy stuff like that. I love that what that brings to my musical life, the fact that I can finish a concert and do Brahms 4 here on a Saturday, get on a plane and fly to Cologne, and then do rap music on the Monday. I'm assuming that's exactly why you like working there as well, because it's such a change of scene, a change of pace, but they're such a good orchestra and they take it all so seriously. So
indeed, fantastic. It's because I like this. I mean, nowadays we have this mindset of he is specialist or she is specialist for
exactly.
this. If you're doing Baroque, you should call him. If you're doing a contemporary music, no, only ask him. And if you're doing a Verdi, and I think what I love is the anti-specialism, which Jan taught us as well. You're an all-round musician. So be able to read jazz chords as well, know a little bit about swing timing, be able to put a Bach cantata or a Brandenburg concerto into a nice shape, but be able to really get this sounding what just came out of the printer or was just written 20 years ago. It didn't came out of the printer, it was written by hand still. So I mean, this diversity or this range of musical styles should be all within our package. And of course, you can deal. Sometimes somebody is more into this and somebody is more into that, but you shouldn't refrain from doing it. And that's exactly what the orchestra does as well. They play, indeed, from Baroque to what just has been arranged or written, and they have a lot of knowledge and a big range of styles that they can apply immediately. And that's something I really like. And that's what keeps the profession fresh. And so, that's just what I love, because every week is different there. And it's not that if you work with them for 10 years that, okay, this is the third time Brahms 4.
Yeah, exactly.
Which can be thrilling as well with one orchestra.
Of course, yeah.
But, I mean, of course, you see, that's something. What a disadvantage is that you may sometimes study repertoire for that you will never ever conduct anywhere else or at all. But
very true.
But that's the only disadvantage I can say if you regard it in investment time. But the musical experience is always fantastic there. And if the concert starts, this orchestra turns really into like they call Rampensau in Germany, which is translated literally like a scene pig,
right?
Which so somebody who lives for the stage, really.
Yeah.
And that's fantastic. So then really this energy goes up. They apply everything we talked about in the rehearsals and worked on. And then this extra layer comes on top as well. And with the energy and their skills. Regardless what the repertoire is every concert with them is just fun. And we're just playing with the material and enjoying ourselves and enjoying the time.
It's a wonderful term, and I can't think of an English equivalent. But you're right. The
Rampensau, you mean?
Yes, the Rampensau. Yeah. Because everything is very professional and everything is very worked through in the rehearsals. The minute you go on stage and they're wearing their black uniforms with their magenta ties, I can't think of any other orchestra really that I work with, other than maybe one of the amateur orchestras in the UK, where you get so much smiling from players, and it's not false. No. They absolutely love.
They love their job. They love being there, and they love to give this. I mean, it's especially this energy transfer that you get there. You put something into them, you get it back, and then it just summons together, and whoop, it goes out into the hall. And regardless if it's an opera excerpt they like, or a freshly composed arrangement, or just an accompaniment, it's it's all good music, or at least they, if it's not that great music, they try to make great
They
music
try
out
to
of it.
make it, yeah, yeah.
And that's something I really appreciate in working with them.
And just so we put it out there, and I know my listeners probably know this, but I am like you. I love going and doing something that's a little bit off the wall. I've done Bollywood music. I've done, things with click track, as I said, gaming music, more than one concert, video gaming music. I love the differences and I love the challenges. It's something that keeps me sort of fresh. And the point about, there's a sort of a flip to what you were talking about, where people are encouraged to be specialists, and it's nice to be an anti-specialist. And I agree, I love that phrase. What that also stops people doing is the other thing that I know, I'm pretty sure that managers and agents do, which is pigeonholing. They put you in a pigeonhole, which said, that pigeonhole is marked opera, Bach, historically
Yeah,
informed, or it's marked English music, late romanticism, whatever it is, and therefore once you're put in that pigeonhole, no, you apparently can't do anything else. Well, that's, to me, that's very untrue. I love doing all sorts of music, and I want to carry on doing it. It's
yeah,
important.
absolutely.
It's important to me because I love music. I don't just love Shostakovich, Benjamin Britten, Mahler, and Walton. I love, which are probably my favorite composers, but I love all sorts of music.
Yeah, indeed. I couldn't agree more about this, Michael. And maybe
Yeah,
I was lucky to be a little bit in the opera system as well, but I was already in the symphony system as
yeah,
well. Now I'm at the VDR, which is so unplaceable.
yeah. It is unplaceable. Yeah.
So yeah, just remain as open and as broadly in this range as possible, and that's something. Yeah, if I get a chance to keep it like that, then I feel most happy as a conductor, to be honest.
Having heard that, and knowing how you described Jan Stuhlen earlier on, you spent 7 years between '07 and 2014 back at Maastricht in the same conservatoire, lecturing or being a professor in orchestral conducting. So when you came to teach, was Jan very much still an influence on you, or had you added things from your time, your experiences in the profession, and what influences were came to bear upon you, and how you
Yeah.
think you taught your students?
Well, it was actually it was 2007 when I started, so I was at the age of 30, which I
Yeah,
always thought is too young to be a professor for conducting. So I actually started this because they were checking around for a new teacher, and somehow my name came up again. Of course, Jan suggested it because he would like to have somebody from his school carrying on this school. But they somehow try. To be honest, they looked around to have. They had a lot of ideas and suggestions, but they somehow wanted to try this with me. And actually, I first doubted it because I thought I'm way too young. I don't have time for this. But I did it out of the love for Jan as well, because he came to me. Well, at least give it a go, please, and try. Uh, you everybody would do that for his teacher if you have this good relationship with him. So, well, I just went there and I said, okay, but let's not agree more than a year, and then we'll see. We'll have a kind of yeah, re-examine this year, and if they want to carry on and I want to carry on, then we'll resume this. And in the end, I was able to stay there for 7 years, but it gave me a lot of joy, and I was able to transfer a lot of the things that I've experienced in that time to my students. But it just took too much energy of me, of still being in Koblenz as a music director, still being in Basel as a guest conductor, mainly for two productions a year. Operatic productions take a lot of time. So I didn't feel like I was able to invest enough in this school in Maastricht, and it was hard for me uh, outside of the class, which I really like teaching the students and having the two pianists playing the arrangements, the orchestral arrangements for two pianos for them. We didn't have an orchestra class at that time, or really an orchestra that we could work with, and I have been busy to try to create that within the 7 years, and in the end. The institute didn't see the necessity of supporting me in that. Let me put it like that. So at a certain time, I just had to give up because I couldn't teach it in the way I really always wanted it to. And of course, I was able in the meantime to try to get some cooperations with some German and Dutch professional orchestras to give them their flying hours as well. So I was teaching there and trying to form this orchestra connection as well with the class, which I didn't succeed in this time. And then I was a little bit disappointed, to put it like that. And I
Yeah.
saw all the time I was investing there and the traveling. And of course, the quality of students was okay, and they really were worth to get an orchestra. But when you don't succeed in 7 years, you will not succeed in 70 years as well, I thought.
No.
And there was a time just to say thank you for this experience, thank you for all the things that I was able to do here. But to be honest, I really don't have time for this anymore, and please try to find somebody else. And then
Mm.
I suggested a colleague, and he did it for 1 year, and then he had to leave again as well. And now it's differently organized, and I actually don't have any connections anymore to them, but I hope it all works out fine for them, and it's being
It,
solved there meanwhile.
it's the toughest thing of all, isn't it? When you're a student conductor, you can take it to the most derogatory comment about two pianos in conducting classes, and that would be, and I've quoted it before on the podcast. Simon Rattle is quoted as saying, "Conducting two pianos is great if you want to learn how to conduct two pianos,"
True.
which is sort of true.
Or 40 percussionists as well, I would add.
Yeah,
But I mean, yeah,
yeah. But
yeah.
there are things you can learn with two pianos.
Yeah.
It has to be said, and the best class here in the UK, in Manchester, with Mark Heron, he uses two pianos. Not all of the time. They also have an orchestra, and that's where I'm heading towards. And all of the great classes, be it Panelers, be it Musins, but way back in Leningrad, yes, they had two pianos, but they also conducted orchestras, and that's where you get your flying hours, to use your term, and it's a brilliant term.
Yeah.
I go in once a semester or once a term to the Royal Birmingham Conservatoire and work with the symphony orchestra there, and there are masters conductors there who shadow me and assist me, and I always try and give them time on the podium.
Yeah, indeed.
Because it's important that they're stood in front of the best orchestra available in the conservatoire, even if it's 10 or 15 minutes, but it's something, and it's important that they get the chance to do that. But yeah, without an orchestra, it's very difficult to know whether these people are actually conductors or not. That's
Without an
thing.
orchestra. I mean,
Yeah.
let's have a clarinetist say, well, I'm studying clarinet, but I just have my clarinet one time before Christmas and one time before the summer.
Indeed,
What-
yeah. I've learned all the fingerings.
Yeah.
But
And if I receive my clarinet, I will know exactly what to do. I mean, if somebody
Yeah.
would talk like this, you would just start laughing.
Yeah, of course
And,
you would. Yeah.
And that's something, of course, we know that this amount of musicians cannot be there on a weekly basis. But if there is no guarantee of sometimes having some checkup moments, if people are, apart from their musical skills, if they have the psychology and the range to reach so many people,
Yeah.
that's something which can only be tested in live procedure with living musicians of
Yes.
that amount.
Yeah, communicating with them and being the amateur psychologist that we need to be. We need to be able to feel the mood in the room. We need to know when we've said something that just by the facial gesture alone, you realize you've just pissed off the first trombone or the first trumpet, or, you can't do that with two pianos. You need those people in the room. So,
and if it was on purpose, then it probably has served your goal. And if it wasn't, you apologize and you try to make music again and carry on.
Exactly. Now, there is an 11th question, Enrico, before we get to the 10 questions, which virtually every conductor has answered for me, and it's about score study. When you come to study a score, do you still lean on the piano, or do you do it with your inner ear at your desk? Do you start from big and go in small, or start at page one and work your way through? And for the big geeks, of which I am one, are you a marker-inner, a scribbler in your scores, using red, blue, black, green marker pens, whatever, or do you like to keep them virginally clean?
Okay, those were a lot of questions. Let me first, I try to apply all of the sources that we have. I mean, of course, we have the dry reading.
Yeah.
We have the Partiturspiel, the score playing, as we know, on the piano. And to be honest, if it's a repertoire piece that at least 2 or 3 people have experienced before me in recording or in live sessions, I mean, we don't have to reinvent the wheel, but we just not only rely on the skills of the others. So I first have a quick dry look at it. Then I go through it at the piano, but roughly.
Yeah.
Then I start listening, because generally I wouldn't say listen to high class orchestras, but then I try to listen on purpose to orchestras of the middle section or the lower section, so that I can really hear the problems that are already expected from reading, if
Yes.
they are still there in performances or whatever, so that I try to get a little bit more expertise, and so even if I go stand there for the first time conducting this piece, that I have a little bit more of inside information on the piece just by using the experiences of my colleagues that have gone through this piece before as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I try
Part of
to
what Yevi has said, you'd be crazy not to listen to the greats having conducted the piece you're learning. You don't need to copy them, but you'd be crazy
no.
to ignore them.
No, we're stubborn enough to have our own style. We will
Yeah.
never copy anyone without asking why are we doing this.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, Michael, I would even rephrase it and try to say it's arrogant towards the orchestra not to use this information, because then you would come to this rehearsal more uninformed, which I think nowadays is even less acceptable than it was 30 or 40 years ago, when we didn't have the sources yet available that easily for everyone. So I think you should have noticed of all the latest recordings on Spotify and on YouTube, just because they're available and they're there, and it's common for everybody to get a hold of that and get the informations out of that. And yes, I do write a lot in my scores, or write a lot. I used to use red and blue for dynamic and instrument entrances and stuff. But what I love to have in opera scores is that almost every soloistic, more appearing role gets its own color in neon. So
Oh,
I
right.
have,
Yeah.
the tenor is the first tenor is always yellow. The soprano is always in pink. The first baritone is always in green, so to say. And I have this system which gives me, even for the ensemble rehearsals and in the night when I'm conducting, like in the repertoire system, you haven't seen the score for quite a long time.
No.
You just go through it in the morning again when you have the next performance. It helps you to get this overview. So yes, I use normal pencil, red pencil, blue pencil, and all the neon colors I can find.
Well, I've never, well, I say never. I've done 2/4 operas in my career, and when it came to opera, I used an awful lot more color than I ever did before. It's a good system, that the first tenor and the first baritone, and to stick with those colors. It would have helped me probably a lot more when I did Il Tritico, for instance. That you could just use one color for the main tenor role, and
you just open the score and you see already, without knowing exactly, oh, these there, oh yeah, let's do in this scene, who's in there, chuck chuck chuck, and then you can give the answer to the Studienleiter, who's the guy he who's responsible for the planning of the next day for the BO, for the orchestra stage rehearsal. And if just one aria is in for the guy with the green color, you're asking yourself, do I need him, or can I switch this to the next rehearsal? And this is about people management, and about using your sources and resources as well, that you don't call in people just for 10 minutes. That's what I always try to avoid, and that's what Jan taught us as well. Of course, if you want a tutti, of course, call them in, give them as much as possible to do. Of course, if the trombones just have to play 5 minutes in all the program, of course you call them in, but you call them in at 10 o'clock, and then you rehearse this till 10:15, and they say, gentlemen, thank you very much.
The rest of the day's your own, indeed, and they appreciate it. I did a similar thing last week with the London Philharmonic Orchestra. We had a 3-hour pre-rehearsal on Thursday for a morning concert on the Friday. I went from big to small, so that and you haven't got somebody sitting there who played in the first piece and then doesn't play again for 2 hours, and that person could be the chairman of the players committee. If you, for instance, if you happen to make a piccolo sit around for 2 hours, or a harpist sit around for 2 hours, and then you wonder why you're not invited back. Well, maybe that was the reason being is the person who was in charge of re-invites on the committee was the person you just made sit there for 2 hours. And
if there is a necessity to keep them wait, at least communicate that to them. Sorry,
absolutely,
we now have a problem, or sorry, I miscalculated. I just see that you're still in that, and I have because then I work with colors as well. If I just have one piece with tuba and one with harp, of course I mark this extra so that I try to keep the order of the rehearsal connected to their appearances, of course. But sometimes you can forget something, or you have different editions or different arrangements sometimes. Of course, then it can happen, but they have a reason then, and they are more willingly to forgive you. But if you just have people sitting around, it resembles a little bit as well. Well, I don't care who you are, what do you do, a little bit for me as well. If you it's about wertschätzen. How do you call it in in English. Um, hmm, Let me see. Esteeming, value of
Yeah,
the people. That,
it's respecting them
yeah,
and
respect for the musicians.
yeah, and giving them the value of of realizing what their role is, and
Yeah,
as if to say, look, I'm well aware. I've even said it before. Look, I've had to come up with a rehearsal order, and a couple of you may be sitting around for a little while,
indeed. Yeah,
but eventually, I am basically going big to small,
big
and
to small.
eventually
Yeah.
I will be able to say goodbye to you. But if you just bear with me, there's a reason why I'm doing it this way. But I am well aware that you're only in 3 pieces of the 11, and you'll be gone soon enough.
Yeah.
And most human beings and musicians will look at you and go, "That's fair enough. At least he's thought about me."
Yeah.
And yeah, it's
He's realized that
true.
we're there and that we're not involved in everything. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's an approach I love, and I'm really pleased I found somebody else who has the same approach. That's great. Are you a young conductor, thirsty for knowledge and wanting to discover more about the conducting world? Then my Patreon page is there for you. I'm constantly posting new content there based on my experiences as a conductor and an ex-orchestral player. And I offer you the chance to ask me any question, any time of the day. For instance, I posted an article just last week tackling the subject of agents and how to get one. You will gain access to interviews, video posts, tour diaries, articles and much more. If you pay for the whole year, then you will gain a 10% discount, and if you are a student, contact me directly and there will be a further discount. All of this can be found at patreon.com/a mic on the podium, and from just £5 a month, you can gain access to this ever-growing resource on conductors and conducting. That's patreon.com. Details and links to the page are in the show notes attached to this episode. Now, the all-important 10 questions with my guest, Enrico Delamboye. Enrico, it's 10 questions time, and I always start with, what sound or noise do you love and what sound or noise do you hate?
What I love is the sound of the coffee machine in the morning giving me my first espresso or lungo. What I hate is the noise of a police car behind me when I've speeded again.
Now, I haven't. How do I put this? I like to drive quite quickly, and I have yet to be pulled over by a policeman. I have been caught by camera, though. I will admit that, dear listener, but I've never been caught by a policeman. So maybe that's a sound I will reserve judgment on, and for the one day it may happen. Coffee machine, absolutely, yeah. It's the first thing I do every morning. Get up, go downstairs, make a coffee. Brilliant answer. Number 3. If you had 24 hours free, what would you spend it doing?
I would go to the sauna or to the swimming pool and do wellness, because that's one of the most regenerating actions I can do within a stressful period of a new production. And I really love having this really big heat and then the cold again. And it feels a little bit like a renascimento, like a rebirth.
Yeah. Are you a jogger, or you're more of a swimmer and a?
I'm more of a swimmer and more of a cycler. I live in the hilly part of the Netherlands. You wouldn't believe. So I have a race bike.
I'll need to Google that. I don't know where that is. But
the deep south.
Right.
But no, it's so I like to get on the bike. I'm not a jogger. I'm not a runner. So
yeah. I walk when I have a day off. In places like when I go to Cologne again in January and early February with Vedier. I've got a couple of days off, and I'll go for a long walk along the river.
Next to the Rhine is lovely. Yeah.
Yeah, and I find that I would imagine it's the same with you in the sauna or in the swimming pool. It gives you time to think. Potentially about the music you've been doing and what's ahead of you, and just gives you time to empty the brain and rethink and de-stress, and it's important to do that.
Yeah, a reset, so to say. Yeah,
exactly. Number 4, who would be your favorite conductors or conductor of yesteryear?
Well, one conductor that I've always admired within the German system was Wolfgang Sawallisch, because he was a great pianist. He grew up in this Kapellmeister tradition, but he was a phenomenal conductor of this great German romantic repertoire, and a very fine accompanist and very respectful towards his singer and towards the orchestra. So he was a connector and somebody who knew a lot, who knew that he knew a lot as well.
Yeah.
Always, so he was from the Alte Garde, from the
The old guard, yeah, the
old
old
generation,
school, yeah,
old school,
yeah,
old
yeah.
guard of the conductors, but a gentleman, really a bonhomme, and that's somebody rare. I really see him as a kind of a example for me.
Well into 120 episodes of this podcast, and I've asked that question well over 120 times, and his name has never come up. And he was a true great conductor. I mean, it goes to show that there are many, many great conductors. But first time he's come up, and thank you for mentioning his name.
You're very welcome.
Really good choice. Now, number 5 is a question that historically some people have found harder to answer. Sometimes they've been repertoire specific, sometimes they've just dodged it completely, or, as I famously repeat, one person actually refused to answer it. And the question is, who would be your favorite current conductor or conductors?
Well, to be honest, from the conductors that are still active nowadays, and I've seen myself and having experienced them having a lot of variety and this range of repertoire, I think one of the most inspiring conductors and very friendly and active conductors that I've seen was Yannick Nézet-Séguin when I saw him at the Rotterdam. And he's always going for the moment, either if it's opera or if it's a symphony or whatever. And he's very inspiring and very friendly to the orchestra, but still urging them on. He's not one of those guys who is too friendly. He's one of the guys that you really believe when he is at the desk, and you have the idea that he's enjoying this profession. And I think that's a turn in our profession. When you look at the old maestros, it always looks like a burden to be in that position sometimes if you're working. And maybe he's sometimes a little bit too happy and too enthusiastic about this little chord in the orchestra happening, but at least he's living the profession, he's experiencing the music, and I think it's always inspiring.
Well, I played for him before I retired in 2014. I played for him probably in the last 3 or 4 years of my violin playing career. And I agree with that, that there is an enthusiasm there, a natural enthusiasm for the music and for music making.
Yeah.
To the point where, already at that stage, I had a conducting career and, I was about to retire as a violinist and go freelance as a conductor, which means I had very definite views on interpretation and on balance and on things. And there were many times I completely disagreed with what he was saying. But his infectious enthusiasm and love of the music and the process and the music making and the people he was working with made me want to play.
You want to play for him, and that's something which I think is one of the most important things. Because if I go into the auditorium as in the audience as well as a listener, I can have heard interpretations that I really would never do like that, but I can get really enthusiastic because they match to the personality and to the musicality of the one transferring this to the orchestra.
Absolutely.
And I've had the same experience as well. Conductors choosing almost the same tempi, having almost the same dynamical retouche and stuff like that, and you just think, well, this is boring, please do something else. So it really has to do, it is connected with the people urging this on and transferring that at the moment. That's a very important. A great experience, because if it's credible and if it's authentic to the one that is doing that at that moment, then it's a lovely performance, I think.
Number 6, what is the hardest work you have ever conducted?
The hardest work I've ever conducted. I don't know if it really is the hardest work, but it was a hard work under very hard circumstances. And that was Wozzeck by Alban Berg. After having not been played for 1 month within the repertoire system, and me jumping in as a zweite Kapellmeister for our game day, our chief conductor. And it's only 90 minutes, but in these 90 minutes, I became 90 years older. I felt like that within that night. And to be honest, I sweated a lot, and it took me 2 days before and 2 days afterwards to get down from this experience. But after this, I felt like a hero because I survived, and we just had 2 very interesting moments, let's put it like that, in the whole piece. And the rest actually went very fine. And that was because everybody shit his pants as well, to put it
of course.
But that was very thrilling and very demanding. And I think that was one of the most hardest and thrilling moments in my profession as well, because it's not good for your heart to experience that every 3 months, because then you would die before you're 30, I think. But it was an experience that I really look back in a way of, yeah, this was quite awesome that we all survived. And yeah, it's complicated enough that things could have gone more wrong and we would
Yeah.
have to abort the mission completely.
Well, the analogy I like to use is, like it's like you've gone and sat in a car where all the controls are around the wrong way, and you've got a set time to get from A to B. What happened was you probably banged the wing mirrors. You maybe drove up onto the pavement a couple of times,
Yeah,
but what you
indeed.
didn't do was crash the car.
Yeah, the car went on. We never
yeah.
stopped. Yeah.
Yeah, there was some damage and there were some people screaming on the back seat, but at least you got there in the end. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I still have my driver's license.
And you weren't pulled over by the police. Yeah.
They didn't have any time to catch me.
Brilliant answer. Absolutely wonderful answer. Number 7. When traveling abroad to conduct, what item could you not leave home without?
Be honest, we already referred to the coffee machine. If I'm driving by car, I really am that snobby to take my own coffee machine.
You're not the first person to say coffee machine. In fact, somebody, and I cannot remember who it was, had one shipped out to Spain where they were doing an opera run for 8 weeks, had one actually shipped out there so that they could have their coffee machine in their apartment for 8 weeks.
And I know one conductor, a colleague of mine, who is traveling a lot with not by car but by planes and by train or whatever thing. And when he comes to an orchestra regularly, he has a certain type of pillow that he sleeps best on. So now he has bought in a few towns that he's coming exact the same type of pillow, and they're just keeping it at the hotel for him. So whenever he comes there, this pillow is available for him. Well, he doesn't ship it, but it's everywhere, and the world is prepared for his own pillow, which I think is fantastic as well.
That's also been quite a popular answer, pillow, but I think a lot of people pack theirs. I don't know how they manage it. They must have huge suitcases.
Yeah.
But yeah, coffee machine, yeah, absolutely. It's so important that it's also, if you're going somewhere, it's good to feel comfortable first thing in the morning and not feel under stress of trying to find a decent coffee.
Indeed.
Number 8, anything you like. Can be very serious, can be silly. You can make us all wear Dutch football kit or whatever you want. What is the one thing you would change about being a conductor?
Oh, the things I would change about being a conductor is sometimes the traveling necessity in the night towards the next orchestra. That's something I really know is necessary, because you cannot make 80 people come to you. You have to go to them. But if sometimes this flexibility could be a little bit more, that orchestra could move into the night and you would just have the daytime to travel. That's something which sometimes has been killing for me and sometimes will be killing in the future. And that we stop at a time when no public transport is available anymore, and we have to be there at a moment when public transport probably doesn't get you there anymore. So you have to drive through the night, just sleep 2 or 3 hours maximum, and then go to the next orchestra. That's sometimes I think I would like to change for the background aspects of this profession.
It's tough when you have a very close end of one project, start of the next project, and you're either on a red eye or you're on a 5:15 flight out of somewhere, and you only get 2 or 3 hours sleep or whatever it is. I had a Zoom chat, a group Zoom chat on my Patreon page just yesterday, and one of the people asked me, why do conductors choose to have one orchestra in America and the other in South Korea? Surely that doesn't make any sense at all. I said, well, they've been offered the jobs there, and that's.
Do they choose?
Do they choose? No, they don't. They get but there are things, because we want to do the work. Sometimes we have to we put up with driving through the night. I've done it across the UK. Finished somewhere and done a 5-hour drive back to Birmingham because I knew I was on at 10 o'clock the next morning, and you just have to do it. The sensible thing to do would be to say no to one of them, but you just don't, do you? You
would miss this chance or this repertoire that you were always longing for, or this cooperation with the orchestra that you love. And
absolutely,
it's like a relationship. You sometimes give into something that the bigger result is better for everybody.
Absolutely. Number 9, again, real or fantasy, whatever you want. Could be something you wished you'd done. What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
I would love to be a pilot once in a plane.
All the way back to episode 2, or the very first episode I released, Andrew Litton, and dotted throughout Alpesh Chauhan. Of course, Daniel Harding, I said he couldn't answer that because he already is one. But I think I've had 4 or 5 pilots. Were you always, from a little boy, interested in flight and planes?
Yes, because I always said if I cannot become a conductor, I want to become a pilot.
Yeah.
But then there was the thing about my eyes, because I wear glasses, which already is problematic for the test. And then I found out you have to be better at physics than I was. So this cleared the whole situation.
Yeah. Well, maybe one day you can go up in one of these 2-seater and somebody can hand you the controls for 5 minutes and live your dream that way.
Who knows?
Who knows? And finally, Enrico, if the world were to end tonight, what would be your choice of final meal and drink?
Well, I'm lucky to have the possibility of not having to choose between the meal or the drink. So I'm very happy about that. So I might have a very nice medium steak, but just a steak, and a very nice, I think, let's have it like a Malbec.
Oh,
from a very nice Argentinian Cuvier, but not just one glass. We would finish the bottle, I think, and then go towards the end of the world and just wait in all tranquility for this moment to come.
Over the course of the last hour or so, I've discovered that we have a very similar attitude towards conducting, about honesty, about a sort of practical approach. And we have a very similar taste in food, because I'm sure that was the answer I either gave in episode 1, the taster episode, and maybe gave again in episode 50, which was a steak and a Malbec. So
really? Fantastic.
So I would be joining you very much. And it's been an absolute joy chatting to you, as I knew it would be from when we chatted before on Zoom over German hip hop and rap. And I hope one day, very soon, that we can be in Cologne together, and we will go for a steak and a Malbec.
And a Malbec, indeed, my dear. That's something I'm looking forward to already now.
Thank you very much, Enrico.
I enjoyed it. Thank you very much, Michael. All the best.
A Mic on the Podium was devised and produced by Michael Seal, with music by Ben Dawson. Next time, I chat with an American conductor who can count Leonard Bernstein, Michael Tilson Thomas, and Sir Simon Rattle, among others, as being his teachers and mentors. He's possibly best known as being the Professor of Conducting at the University of Music and the Performing Arts in Vienna since 2004. But until then, bye-bye.